course, Unbelievable, the book, will be on sale at the conference. I'll be able to sign copies there. And I've had some interesting feedback, actually, on that. This one from Jim Hall out in Texas says, I'm writing on behalf of the Atheist and Christian Book Club here in Arlington, Texas. Once a month, a group of Christians and atheists meet to discuss a pre-selected book. Your book has been selected for the month of December. What a lovely idea, a Atheist and Christian Book Club. Sounds a little bit like what they do with the Unbelievable Christian and Skeptic discussion group here in London.
In the first three Gospels, Jesus never really thought of himself as a God or even Son of God or anything divine. He thought of himself as maybe a demigod at best, possibly just a mortal in Mark, Matthew, and Luke. He's at one point in Luke 18:9, he gets pissed off when someone accuses him of being godlike or a god. And he said, "Why do you call me good?" Jesus answered, "No one is good except God alone." And only until John does he become divine.
Unitarian Christians about this, Matt Dillahunty was bragging that that he had Robert Price prove me wrong on this point, that to Trinitarian Christians that Jesus is God. Well, it's true to Trinitarian Christians, but Dillahunty didn't specify Trinitarians. He said to Christians. He doesn't, unaware that there were Unitarian Christians and that I was raised by binitarian Christians. And so there's quite a few Christians who do not hold that Jesus is the living avatar of God, that Jesus is to explain what an avatar is, you have a video game and you want to interact with the characters in your video game. So you create a character, that character is you. Now the character cannot do everything that you can do. That character is limited to the video game. You are not. Right? You are technically not in the video game. You can do anything else. You already existed before the game began. You continue to exist after the game ends. But that character in there is you. It knows everything that you know. Now it's capable of doing things in the game that you can't do because it's a two-dimensional pixel item, but still the characters in the game can't talk to your character and have your character be, God is someone else, somewhere else, who knows things I don't know and can do things I can't do. That's what Jesus always only ever says. He distinguishes himself completely from God. Always.
Until John. When we get to John, he is God incarnate.
Well, even then there's a problem. Because, Jesus says, I and the Father are one. But he obviously means in the context of that story, he says that he and the Father are one in purpose. That's implied in the context. Shit. And then how do we know that? Because it's reiterated later when Jesus prays not to himself, but to God. He prays to God asking, can his disciples be also one with God, just as Jesus is one with God? So if God says yes, your disciples can be one with me just as you were one with me. Well, what does that mean about Jesus? Jesus is obviously not one with God, right?
Yeah.
So, when Jesus is in Gethsemane, which a lot of people have commented that their favorite part of the Bible is when Jesus is alone talking with God and someone who was never there was writing it all down.
It's written in an omniscient third-person narrative. How can that be?
Because Jesus comes down and is immediately arrested and didn't have time to tell anybody anything. Certainly not all of it in rhyme and all that shit. But so Jesus is praying to God and says, take this cup away from me, not because I will it, says Jesus unto Jehovah, but because thou wills it. Now, does that sound like Jesus is the avatar, the player character that God has created for the video game that he created? Clearly, Jesus cannot be God. Now, it's not just the binitarian and the Unitarian Christians who hold this position. This is a position of an early offshoot of Christianity called Arianism, where Arius was arguing that Jesus is not the essence of God, and that other people that he was a created being, and that other people, Athanasius, I think it was arguing that this is in the Nicene Convention, where Athanasius is saying, no, Jesus is God, is a physical embodiment of God. And this is just people making up shit because they're trying to they're trying to reconcile the contradiction of Isaiah 45, 5, 6, and 7, wherein God says, there will be no other gods before you. You shall have no other gods before me. But then later Jesus comes along and says, no one gets to the Father but through me. Well, Jesus is posing himself as a God, before Abraham I am,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So Jesus is saying that he existed before the foundations of the world, that he is not God. Jesus is specified he is not God, but he exists before Abraham.
Severe identity crisis.
Yeah, if we can even attribute any of this to Jesus.
Once upon a time, a woman confessed to Muhammad that she had become pregnant and the father was not her husband. He told her to go have the baby and then return to him. She did as she was commanded. Muhammad then, in all his abundant mercy, ordered that the woman be stoned to death. The end. For an unmarried Muslim woman guilty of zina or illegal sex, Sharia or Islamic law sentences her to death by stoning. She will be buried up to her shoulders and pelted in the head with stones until she dies, horribly. The Sharia sentence for premarital sex in Pakistan is 100 lashes. Unwed Muslim mothers are shielded by progressive laws and societal notions that have largely decriminalized consensual adult sexual behavior in a country where religion and state are separated. It is women, rarely men, who become targets of these punitive laws in Muslim countries.
Theists are fond of saying, something cannot come from nothing. But their holy books say otherwise. Do you not remember that we were created man from nothing? By faith, we understand that the universe was formed by God's command, so that what is seen was made from nothing.
Only 21% of uneducated Americans believe in the theory of evolution. 74% of educated Americans believe in the theory. Yes, evolution is a theory, and theories are based on facts. Facts are data that are confirmed to such a degree that it would be perverse to withhold provisional consent. A theory in the everyday sense is synonymous with a hypothesis or mere speculation. Scientific theories, on the other hand, are structures of ideas that explain and interpret facts. The theory of evolution by natural selection has just as much accumulated supporting data as a theory of gravity, cell theory, atomic theory, and the germ theory of disease. Now, this one runs the gamut. So there are denominations of Christianity where this is fine. The theory of evolution is a description of forces that God put in place over the time periods as dictated by our current scientific knowledge. And then there are churches that are like, no, don't be ridiculous. The earth is 6,000 years old and nothing evolved. Things only adapt amongst their kinds and everything was created in their kind. You won't find out necessarily what your church believes until you've actually become dependent on the social structures that they put in place or the control mechanisms that they use to keep you in their flock. So like we've talked about, the mind control through your sexual desires, the social pressures through arranging a hierarchy between male and female and children, and all this other stuff. This sort of feels like this comes at the end. It's like, hey, we've separated you from thinking critically about gender. We've separated you from thinking critically about your own self-worth. Now we're going to separate you from thinking critically about scientific facts. And once they can get you to accept that science on evolution is corrupt and wrong or spreading lies, it becomes much easier for you to be susceptible to some other more dangerous and subversive types of conspiracy, shall we say. You won't find this information front and center in my experience. I've actually tried to do videos based on looking at, what the stance of a particular denomination is on evolution, without it being obvious ones like AIG or something. And it wasn't easy, particularly looking in Australia and stuff. It's not a doctrine that's front and center. It's definitely one of the sub-doctrines that become emergent the longer you're with them. It's possible that it might come up early in conversation, but it's one of the things, I guess, it's a hard sell to come out and tell someone up front, hey, evolution's not real. They want to get that emotional control first, and once they've got that emotional control, you'll be much more accepting of things like, hey, by the way, we believe that the Word of God is 100% infallible, 100% literal fact, and so we, by nature, need to accept that the theory of evolution is incorrect since it doesn't agree with the Word of God, and you'll be likely to go along with that by then. Now, that's not to say I believe that in all cases that this is a direct and conscious effort. I think this is a self-selecting effort in terms of the religion propagating itself. Chances are the person that tells you this also believes it, and it just happens to self-select the type of people that continue to believe after being exposed to this. It's a really good example, and it's how a lot of the really sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, like the worst parts of Christianity are buried in their doctrines like this. It's kind of like that. Like there's no verse that says the theory of evolution is incorrect, but it's the aggregate of meaning that is read into it by people with potentially a bias for potentially bigoted ideas at the outset that are able then to create these doctrinal superstructures that are made up of an aggregate of verses and an aggregate of assumptions of meaning on the Bible, and they're not good. Definitely something to be aware of.
Atheists can look forward to being tortured until the end of time for the simple crime of doubt. Yet despite this being a claim of both Islam and Christianity, both religions claim that their God is a God of love.
Jim has entitled Creeping Sharia. A note before I begin this, I recognize what Jim's trying to do here, but I think we ought to take caution to a degree in the way we frame this particular question. I'm a liberal. Not everyone who is watching this or who is an atheist is. As a liberal, I'm committed to the idea that no social institution should be beyond us asking hard questions of. Our own institutions or those of other cultures. We ought to be allowed to ask difficult questions in order to make sure that we're making the right progress, right? Bending the arc toward justice, as Dr. King would have said. Having said that, I'll read these bullet points that Jim has posed here for contemplation. Creeping Sharia. There are approximately 100 mosques in the United States in 1970. Right before the 9/11 attacks, there were 1,209 mosques. By 2010, the number rose 74% to 2,106. Many taxi drivers in Minneapolis are refusing to pick up any passengers they suspect of carrying alcohol. Jim notes here, the next bullet point, a Tyson Foods plant in Tennessee changed the Labor Day paid holiday to, and I'm going to mangle the pronunciation, Eid al-Fitr, pressured by hundreds of Muslim employees. The University of Michigan has installed ritual Islamic foot baths on campus. And then Jim closes with this question: how long do you think it will take for Islamic communities in the United States to begin pushing for the right to beat their wives or conduct honor killings? And while I understand what Jim is asking here, I think we should take caution in the tone of how we frame these questions. There are certain things we should certainly be prepared to go to the mat on to protect, women and other people. But I also want to be cautious about framing an entire group of people based on some practice that we might not approve of, that they might not approve of either.
If the Earth were reduced to the size of a small grape, at the same scale, the moon would be the size of a peppercorn. The sun would be about the size of a beach ball, about a football field away. Neptune would be the size of a ping pong ball about 2 miles away. The next nearest star, Alpha Centauri, would be another beach ball about 19,000 miles away. Now keep those comparative sizes and distances in mind when I tell you this. Life as we know it exists on less than 20% of the surface of one of 8 planets in one solar system, which is located in an infinitesimally small portion of the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy. Just one of between 500 billion and 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, with an average of 100 billion stars per galaxy. Do you really think that a universe as vast and inhospitable as this one was intelligently created with your insignificant butt in mind?
The Islamic slave trade rivaled, nay, surpassed the Atlantic slave trade in many aspects. It affected a larger demographic of indigenous peoples, it was more profitable, and it went on longer. Male castration of slaves was standard practice in the Islamic world. For example, around 930 CE, Caliph al-Muqtadir had as many as 11,000 eunuchs in his palace in Baghdad. I mean, if you want to look at it from a business standpoint, if you're selling a product, you wouldn't want the product to have the ability to reproduce. That would lead to less customers returning after their product has expired. Also, it was meant to remove the idea of sexual reproduction and the inclination of falling in love. Like Grey Worm in the Game of Thrones, castration removes physical elements that could lead to the individual expressing ideas of autonomy and human characteristics. It was meant to help maintain the image that these were not human beings, and thus, like other animals, should be used to help man with labor. Fucked up, I know.
Atheist Edge. Walking the edge of what some consider offensive. But your feelings don't matter here. Only facts.
313. No, I've got an itchy nose. God damn it. I'm leaving this in because maybe this will amuse you to see me squirming and muttering to myself.
Edgy commentary on the dangers of doctrine, the foibles of faith, the bullshit of belief, the stupidity of superstition, and the idiocy of indoctrination.
Yes, evolution is a theory, and theories are based on facts. Facts are data that...
With razor-sharp wit, curiosity, and critical thought, we take an unblinking look at today's religions. We are Atheist Edge.